It was a warm, sunny afternoon in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city. Birds chirped from the trees, children played outside, and most people were relaxing, enjoying the peaceful weekend. 17-year-old Alyssa Carter had just finished hanging out at her best friend Mia's house. They had watched movies, laughed about school drama, and eaten popcorn. Now Alyssa was walking home, her headphones in her ears, her favorite playlist on repeat, and her backpack bouncing gently on her shoulder. Alyssa wasn't in a rush. She liked walking through the neighborhood, especially when the sky was clear and everything felt calm. She had always felt safe here. She had lived in this area her whole life. Everyone knew her as the smart, polite daughter of Captain Ronald Carter, one of the most respected police officers in the city. She was about 2 blocks from her house when she noticed a police car parked near the corner. She didn't think much of it. Police cars were common in her area. But suddenly the siren gave a short, loud burst, and the car pulled toward her fast. Confused, she stopped walking and looked up, pulling out one of her earbuds. A white police officer stepped out of the vehicle quickly. His name was Officer Mark Delaney. His face was tight with suspicion as he pointed at Alyssa and shouted, "Hey, you! Stop right there! Hands where I can see them!" Alyssa blinked, surprised. "Me?" she asked, putting both hands in the air slowly. "I'm just walking home." "Turn around! Now!" he shouted again, his voice sharp and aggressive. Alyssa tried to stay calm. "I didn't do anything. I live right there, down the street. I said turn around," he barked, and before she could react, he opened the back of his police car. A large German shepherd leapt out, barking loudly, its body tense and alert. The dog snarled and pulled at the leash, and Officer Delaney gave it a command she couldn't understand. Alyssa's heart started pounding. She took a step back, fear rising quickly in her chest. "Please, I didn't do anything," she said, her voice shaking. "Stop resisting," the officer shouted, though she hadn't moved aggressively at all. Then, without warning, he let go of the leash. The dog lunged at Alyssa with full force. It sank its teeth into her left arm, dragging her down to the sidewalk. She screamed in pain as she hit the ground, the dog pulling and shaking her arm violently. Her backpack flew off, her phone slid across the pavement, and tears streamed down her face. "Stop it! Please! I didn't do anything!" she cried, trying to curl into a ball, trying to protect herself. But the officer didn't call the dog off immediately. He walked slowly toward her, shouting again that she was resisting. The dog kept biting, blood dripping from her arm onto the sidewalk. People nearby started to gather. One woman pulled out her phone and began recording. "She's just a kid," someone yelled. "Call that dog off," another man shouted. "She's not doing anything. She's not even armed." After what felt like forever, Officer Delaney finally pulled the dog back. Alyssa lay trembling on the ground, her arm torn and bloody. She could barely breathe from the pain and shock. "I told you to stop moving," the officer said coldly, as he handcuffed her wrists behind her back, ignoring her cries. "I wasn't moving. I was just walking home," she sobbed, the cuffs pressing into her already injured arm. By now, more people were filming. A young man stepped forward and said, "You better check who she is, man. Do you even know who she is?" Officer Delaney ignored him. He radioed in, saying, "Suspect detained. Minor injuries. Requesting medical support." Alyssa couldn't believe what was happening. One moment she was walking home, listening to music. The next, she was lying on the ground, injured, handcuffed, treated like a criminal. All because of a mistake. Or maybe not a mistake. Maybe it was something worse. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. Paramedics gently lifted her onto a stretcher, whispering words of comfort. But she was still crying, her whole body shaking. One of the EMTs, a kind older woman named Sandra, noticed the badge on Alyssa's backpack with her father's name written on the tag. "Captain Carter?" she whispered. "Are you his daughter?" Alyssa nodded weakly. "Please call my dad," she whispered. "Please." Sandra nodded. "Don't worry, I will." At the hospital, doctors cleaned and bandaged her arm. They said the dog bites were deep and would leave scars. She might need physical therapy. The pain medicine helped a little, but her heart still ached. How could this have happened? In the emergency room, Sandra stepped out and made a call. Captain Ronald Carter was at the station reviewing paperwork when his phone rang. When he heard the name Alyssa and police dog, he stood up so fast that his chair toppled behind him. He drove to the hospital in record time, his sirens off, but his heart thundering in his chest. When he entered the hospital room, Alyssa looked up with teary eyes and reached for him with her uninjured hand. "Daddy," she whispered. Captain Carter rushed to her side. The moment he saw her wounded arm, the tears in her eyes, and the raw terror on her face, something inside him snapped. His daughter, his little girl, treated like a criminal, attacked like an animal. "Who did this?" he asked gently, brushing her hair away from her face. She told him everything, from the moment she saw the police car to the moment the dog bit her. She told him how scared she was, how she had done nothing wrong, how she had begged the officer to stop. Captain Carter listened quietly, his jaw clenched, his hands tight. When she finished, he stood up and left the room. He didn't yell. He didn't make a scene. He made a call to Internal Affairs, then another to the police chief. He asked for Officer Delaney's report. He asked for the body cam footage. And he didn't stop asking until someone gave him answers. Back at the police station, Officer Delaney filled out a report that described Alyssa as suspicious, non-compliant, and resisting arrest. He claimed she matched the description of someone who had been reported in the area. But there was no official suspect description in the dispatch records. No call that described a teenage girl. No report that fit Alyssa in any way. When Delaney submitted his body cam footage, it was mysteriously missing several minutes. The audio cut out right before the dog attack, and the video was blurry in parts. Captain Carter wasn't surprised. He'd seen this kind of thing before, but never imagined it would happen to his own daughter. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, more and more people began to gather. News of the incident had spread quickly. The video of Alyssa being attacked by the dog had already been shared thousands of times on social media. People were angry, not just because it happened, but because it happened to a girl who was clearly innocent. At home, Alyssa sat quietly on the couch, her arm bandaged, her father beside her. She had stopped crying, but her eyes were tired. She didn't feel safe anymore, not even with her own father in the room. Captain Carter looked at her and made a silent promise. This would not be swept under the rug. This would not be forgotten. No amount of silence could hide what had been done. He knew that what happened to Alyssa had happened to many others before. But this time, the system had picked the wrong girl. After the terrifying incident, Alyssa lay in the hospital bed, her arms swollen and covered in bandages. The pain from the dog bites was sharp and constant. But what hurt even more was the fear and confusion inside her. She kept replaying the moment when the dog attacked her. The growling, the sharp teeth biting into her skin, and the cold, harsh voice of Officer Delaney ordering the dog on her. How could this happen to her? She had done nothing wrong. Despite the pain, Alyssa's mind was focused on one thing: her father. She kept asking the nurses and doctors, "Where's Dad? Can I see him, please?" The hospital staff quickly understood that Alyssa needed her father's comfort more than anything else. Captain Ronald Carter was notified as soon as the hospital realized who Alyssa was. The moment he heard that his daughter was admitted because of a police dog bite, he felt a rush of emotions. There was anger, fear, and disbelief all mixed together. His daughter, the girl he had raised with love and care, had been hurt by someone who was supposed to protect her. As a police captain himself, Ronald knew how difficult it was for officers in the line of duty. But this was different. This was his daughter. When he arrived at the hospital, he found Alyssa weak but awake. He held her hand gently, brushing away the tears from her cheeks. Alyssa told him everything, her voice trembling with fear and pain. She explained how Officer Delaney had stopped her, how he ordered the dog on her without giving her a chance to explain or prove that she was innocent. She told him how scared she was when the dog bit her, and how helpless she felt while she was handcuffed and left bleeding on the street. Captain Carter listened quietly, but inside he was burning with rage. He couldn't believe that someone in his own police department had treated his daughter so badly. More than that, he couldn't understand how the officer had been so careless and cruel. Alyssa was not a suspect. She was a child, a young girl walking home safely. How could it come to this? After spending time comforting Alyssa, Captain Carter began to act. He knew he had to get to the bottom of this. He immediately contacted the Internal Affairs Division of the Police Department. Internal Affairs is the branch responsible for investigating complaints and misconduct within the police force. He demanded a full report about what had happened to his daughter. He also requested the body camera footage worn by Officer Delaney during the incident. Police officers are required to wear cameras that record their actions and conversations. This footage would be crucial evidence. However, when the footage arrived, there were problems. Some parts were missing, including the moments when the dog attacked Alyssa. The audio also cut out during critical sections. It looked like someone had tried to hide what really happened. Captain Carter's suspicions grew. He had heard stories before about officers trying to cover up misconduct, but seeing it affect his own family was painful. He decided to investigate the case himself, quietly and carefully. While the official investigation moved slowly, Captain Carter began gathering statements from witnesses who had seen the attack. Several neighbors had recorded the incident on their phones, and many had shared the videos online. The videos showed Alyssa on the ground, crying in pain, while the police dog bit her arm. Bystanders were yelling at the officer to stop, saying that Alyssa wasn't dangerous. Captain Carter used these videos as evidence, making sure they were preserved. He also talked to the friends who had been with Alyssa before the attack. Everyone confirmed that Alyssa had done nothing suspicious. She was simply walking home after spending time with a friend. Meanwhile, Officer Delaney had given his own report of the event. He described Alyssa as suspicious and non-compliant. He claimed she was acting strangely and had refused to follow orders, which justified his use of the dog. But his story didn't match the videos or the witness statements. It seemed clear that he had exaggerated and lied. The news of the attack began to spread beyond the neighborhood. Social media exploded with anger and outrage. Thousands of people shared the videos and expressed their shock that a young black girl had been attacked by a police dog. The story quickly caught the attention of civil rights groups who demanded justice and called for an independent investigation. Captain Carter found himself in a difficult position. As a police captain, he was part of the system that was supposed to protect officers like Delaney. But as a father, he wanted justice for his daughter. He refused to let the department cover up the truth. The police department was under pressure. The mayor and city officials could no longer ignore the public outcry. They announced that an independent team outside the police department would investigate the case to ensure fairness. During this time, Officer Delaney was placed on administrative leave, meaning he could not work while the investigation was ongoing. However, some police officers defended him, saying he had followed procedures. This created tension within the department. At home, Alyssa was recovering but deeply shaken. She had nightmares about the dog attack and was afraid to go outside. Captain Carter stayed by her side, protecting her as best he could. He made sure she had counseling and medical care to help with her physical and emotional wounds. Despite the challenges, Alyssa's courage grew. With her father's support, she found strength to speak out about her experience. She wanted the world to know what happened and to help prevent this from happening to others. The family's fight for justice was just beginning, but they were determined not to give up. Captain Carter promised Alyssa that he would use all his power and knowledge to make sure the truth came out and that the officer who hurt her would face consequences. As the investigation continued, more people learned about Alyssa's story, and her voice became a symbol of hope and change in a community that had long suffered from police violence. The incident that started with fear and pain was now growing into a movement for justice. The moment the video showing Alyssa being attacked by the police dog was posted online, the story exploded. It spread quickly, faster than anyone had expected. People from all over the city, and soon the whole country, watched in shock as they saw a young black girl, hurt and scared, being bitten by a police dog. The video captured everything: the fear on Alyssa's face, the dog's teeth sinking into her arm, the angry commands from Officer Delaney, and the crowd yelling at the officer to stop. Social media lit up with comments. Thousands of people shared the video, wrote messages of support for Alyssa, and demanded answers. The hashtags calling for justice started trending. People were angry not just because of what happened to Alyssa, but because they recognized the story. It was a story they had heard many times before, about police using unnecessary force, especially against black people. Local news stations picked up the story too. Reporters showed the video during the evening news, interviewed people who had witnessed the attack, and spoke with experts about police use of dogs and excessive force. The story was no longer just about one girl. It had become a symbol of a bigger problem in the community. At the center of this storm was Captain Ronald Carter. As Alyssa's father and a respected police captain, he found himself caught in an impossible position. He wanted justice for his daughter, but he also knew that speaking out against one of his own officers would create tension within the police department. Some officers saw him as a traitor for standing up publicly. Others quietly supported him. Despite this, Captain Carter refused to stay silent. He held a press conference where he spoke as a father and a police officer. He said that, no matter what, justice must be served, and police misconduct could not be ignored. His words resonated deeply with the public because he was someone from inside the system speaking out against wrongdoing. Meanwhile, protests began to form outside the police station. People carried signs saying, "Justice for Alyssa," and "Stop police violence." Families, students, community leaders, and civil rights activists gathered to demand that Officer Delaney be held accountable. The protests were peaceful but powerful, growing larger every day. The mayor of the city, feeling the pressure from the community and the media, promised an independent investigation. This meant that people from outside the police department would review the case to make sure it was fair and honest. The promise was welcomed by many but viewed with suspicion by some, who feared it would be just another way to delay justice. Officer Delaney was placed on administrative leave during the investigation. He was not allowed to work or wear his uniform. Some of his supporters inside the police force said he had followed procedures and was being unfairly punished. But the videos and eyewitness accounts told a different story. Alyssa was healing physically but struggling emotionally. She was afraid to leave the house, afraid to face the world outside. She had nightmares of the dog attack and of the officer's cold face. With her father's support, she started seeing a counselor to help her work through her fear and anger. Her friends and community rallied around her too. They visited her, brought her meals, and offered encouragement. Alyssa slowly found the courage to speak publicly about her experience. At community meetings and events, she told her story, not just to share her pain, but to help others understand why police reform was needed. The police department was forced to confront its problems. Investigations revealed that Officer Delaney had a history of complaints, many involving aggressive behavior and unnecessary use of force. Some complaints had been dismissed quickly or ignored. It became clear that this was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger issue. Public officials and civil rights groups used Alyssa's story to push for changes in how police handle situations involving K-9 units and the use of force in general. They called for better training, more transparency, and stronger consequences for officers who abused their power. Captain Carter continued to work behind the scenes, using his position to help push for reforms within the department. He met with community leaders, policymakers, and activists, hoping to build bridges and find real solutions. Alyssa's story became a symbol of hope and change. What had started as a painful and frightening attack turned into a movement for justice. People, who once felt powerless, began to speak out. Communities that had been divided started to come together. Despite the challenges, Alyssa and her father remained strong. They knew the fight was far from over, but their courage inspired many. Alyssa's voice became a powerful tool to demand accountability and fairness, reminding everyone that justice was worth fighting for. The investigation into what happened to Alyssa was long and difficult. It was not just a simple review of facts, but a test of trust, courage, and truth. Captain Ronald Carter, Alyssa's father, was determined to see justice done, but he also knew it wouldn't be easy. The police department was under pressure from the public and the media, and many officers were nervous about what the investigation might uncover. Some were worried it would expose problems they didn't want to admit. From the beginning, the independent team investigating the case worked hard to gather all possible evidence. They reviewed witness statements, looked at the videos from bystanders, phones, and examined the hospital records showing Alyssa's injuries. They also requested all the official police reports and the body cam footage from Officer Delaney. But one big problem kept coming up. The official body cam footage was incomplete. Key parts were missing or blurry. The audio was cut out during the most important moments. This made it clear to the investigators that something was wrong. It seemed like someone had tried to hide what really happened. The missing footage was a serious issue. It was the one piece of evidence that could have shown exactly how the situation escalated and whether Officer Delaney's actions were justified. Captain Carter was frustrated by this. He knew how important the body cam footage was. He believed the missing parts would show the truth, that his daughter was innocent and that Officer Delaney had acted wrongly. He pressed the investigators to dig deeper. He demanded that they find out who was responsible for deleting or hiding the footage. During this time, the media continued to report on the story. News outlets interviewed Captain Carter, Alyssa, and witnesses. The public followed every update, watching the investigation closely. Many people expressed support for Alyssa and her family. They understood that this was not just about one police officer. It was about the way police power was used or misused in their communities. In the police department, tension grew. Some officers felt angry about the public attention and worried that they were all being judged because of one incident. Others sympathized with Captain Carter and believed that change was necessary. The department faced questions from community leaders and city officials about how it handled complaints and investigations. One of the toughest parts for Alyssa was waiting. The investigation took weeks, then months. Each day brought new stress. She was scared that the case might be swept under the rug, like so many others had been. She was also scared of what might happen if Officer Delaney was not held responsible at home. Captain Carter did his best to support Alyssa. He made sure she kept going to therapy to heal from the trauma. He stayed by her side at every hearing, meeting, and interview. He wanted her to know that she was not alone. The family also faced challenges from people who didn't believe Alyssa. Some tried to blame her for what happened, or said that she had provoked the attack. These hurtful voices made the situation even harder. But Alyssa was brave. She refused to let anyone shame her or silence her story. Then a big breakthrough came. The independent investigators discovered that the missing body cam footage had not been lost by accident. It was deliberately deleted. This was serious. Tampering with evidence is a crime, and it showed that someone was trying to cover up the truth. Captain Carter pushed for criminal charges against whoever had deleted the footage. This part of the investigation opened a new chapter in the case. It showed that the problem wasn't just about one officer's use of force, it was about corruption and dishonesty within the department. Meanwhile, Officer Delaney's past was examined more closely. The investigators found that he had been involved in several complaints over the years, many of which involved aggressive behavior and use of force. However, he had never been seriously disciplined. The department had a system that often protected officers from consequences, which allowed people like Delaney to act without fear of punishment. This discovery outraged the public even more. It became clear that the system was broken and needed serious reform. Community leaders and activists used the case to push for new laws and policies to make the police more accountable. They demanded better training for officers, especially about using force and handling situations without violence. They also called for stronger oversight and independent review boards with real power to investigate complaints. Captain Carter worked with these groups. He shared his knowledge of the police system and helped build bridges between the community and law enforcement. He spoke at rallies, conferences, and city council meetings, pushing for real change. Alyssa became a symbol of courage and hope. Her story inspired many people, especially young people, to speak out about their own experiences and demand justice. She spoke at schools and community centers, encouraging others to stand up against injustice. Despite the hardships, Alyssa and her family never gave up. They knew the fight for justice was bigger than one case. It was about protecting the rights and dignity of everyone in their city. After months of investigation, the independent team released its report. It concluded that Officer Delaney had used excessive force against Alyssa without cause. The report also condemned the deletion of body cam footage and the department's failure to discipline officers properly. It recommended criminal charges against Delaney and those responsible for deleting evidence. It called for major reforms in the police department, including better training, more transparency, and stronger oversight. The city's leaders accepted the report's recommendations. Officer Delaney was charged with assault and obstruction of justice. The case went to court, where Alyssa bravely testified about what happened. Her words were powerful and heartfelt, touching the jury and the public alike. The trial was closely watched, and it sparked conversations across the nation about police accountability and racial justice. Many hoped it would be a turning point. Through it all, Captain Carter stood by his daughter, proud of her strength and determination. They had faced fear, pain, and anger, but they had also found hope and justice. Their story was a reminder that one voice, one family, could make a difference, even in the face of great injustice. It was a story of courage, truth, and the fight to protect what is right. The day the trial finally began, there was a heavy feeling in the air. For months, the city had waited for justice, and now everything would come down to the courtroom. Alyssa's family, friends, and the whole community gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs and showing their support. People who had never met Alyssa were there because they believed in her story and wanted to see change happen. Inside the courtroom, Alyssa sat with her father, Captain Ronald Carter, holding his hand tightly. She was nervous, but also brave. She knew that what she was about to do was important, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been hurt by injustice. The trial was a chance to tell the truth, and to make sure that the person responsible for hurting her would be held accountable. The prosecutor began by showing the videos of the attack. The courtroom fell silent as the images played on the screen. Everyone could see the fear in Alyssa's eyes and the harshness of Officer Delaney's commands. The dog lunging at her, biting her arm. The pain, the confusion, the crowd's desperate pleas for the officer to stop. It was a powerful moment that reminded everyone why this trial mattered so much. Alyssa then took the stand. Her voice was steady as she told the story of that day. The fear, the pain, and the shock of being attacked by a police dog when she had done nothing wrong. She spoke about the hours she spent in the hospital, the nightmares she couldn't shake, and the way her life had changed since that moment. She also talked about the courage she found with her father's support and how she hoped her story would help others. Witnesses were called to share their accounts. Neighbors who had seen the attack, friends who had been with Alyssa before the incident, and medical staff who treated her injuries all told their parts of the story. Their words matched Alyssa's, painting a clear picture of what had happened. The defense tried to argue that Officer Delaney had acted reasonably. They said he was following procedure and that Alyssa had been suspicious or non-compliant. But their story didn't match the evidence. The missing body cam footage and the deleted files hurt their case deeply. The jury could see the inconsistencies. During the trial, the investigators who uncovered the deleted footage testified about the tampering and the attempt to cover up the truth. This showed the jury that the actions against Alyssa were not just a mistake, but part of a serious problem within the police department. The trial was emotional and tense, but it also showed the strength of Alyssa and her family. Captain Carter spoke passionately about the need for police reform and accountability. He reminded everyone that protecting the community meant treating people with respect and fairness, no matter their skin color or background. After days of testimony, the jury went to deliberate. The city waited anxiously for the verdict. Alyssa and her father stayed close, supporting each other through the long hours. Finally, the jury returned. Officer Delaney was found guilty of assault and obstruction of justice. The courtroom erupted. In a mix of relief, joy, and hope, justice had been served. The verdict sent a strong message, not just to the police department but to communities everywhere. It showed that abuse of power would not be tolerated, that even those in authority must answer for their actions. Following the trial, the city took steps to implement the reforms recommended by the investigation. New training programs were created, focusing on de-escalation and understanding. Independent oversight boards were given real authority to investigate complaints and hold officers accountable. Police departments across the state watched closely, knowing that this case might change how law enforcement operated. For Alyssa, the road to healing was ongoing. The trial had been hard, but it was a step toward reclaiming her life. She continued therapy and found strength in helping others. She spoke at schools and events, sharing her experience and encouraging young people to stand up for justice. Captain Carter remained committed to making the police department better. He worked with community leaders, lawmakers, and activists to build trust and create safer neighborhoods. His role as both a father and a police officer gave him a unique voice, a bridge between two worlds that often felt apart. The impact of Alyssa's story reached far beyond the city. News outlets across the country told her story. It became part of a larger conversation about race, policing, and fairness in America. People began to demand changes in police practices everywhere. The community that had once felt powerless found hope and strength. They realized that standing together and speaking out could lead to real change. Alyssa's courage inspired many to believe in justice, even when it seemed difficult. Years later, Alyssa looked back on what happened not just as a painful moment, but as the beginning of something important. She had faced fear, pain, and injustice, but she had also found her voice and made a difference. She understood that change was a long journey, but every step mattered. Her story became a reminder that one person's courage could challenge even the biggest problems. It showed that families, communities, and even police officers could work together to create a better future. Alyssa and her father continued their fight, not just for themselves but for all those who needed a voice. They became symbols of hope, justice, and the belief that no one should suffer alone.